Our solid waste update. It's January 2nd, 2024. The time is 11 a.m. I'm calling this meeting to order. In attendance are Commissioners Brooks, Matari, and Duncan. Are there changes to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. Public comment. No public comment? All right. Item 1, projects. And so we'll go ahead and turn it over to our solid waste director, John Phillips.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for having me. This is your quarterly update beginning 2024 for the Solid Waste Department. Beginning with projects, the Ramsey Transfer Station. As you know, we've been working on the new future public drop-off area design and the future construction of that area. Kootenai County Solid Waste and Jacobs Engineering have been working together to finalize the design. Of course, the design's done and the layout's done. We are beginning to rough stake the area now, and we're nearly ready to begin the actual construction process. This planned future area will allow customers to come to the Ramsey Transfer Station property with small loads. It'll be a controlled site where we have staffing, and the people will not have to go through the scales, either inbound or outbound, and be able to throw out small loads. It's estimated that this could cut down on some of that scale house transfer station traffic by 30 to 50%, which seems pretty aggressive, but that's what the numbers are saying. And we do anticipate the county will be able to construct the majority of this dumping area over the course of the remaining of this winter and the spring. The project is somewhat weather dependent. So far, our weather's been really very much in our favor, but we've needed those dump trucks at the landfill property for another project. So I think we'll get that going here pretty quickly. We are, however, waiting on IDEQ anyway for final say on building on top of that landfill. Due to the holidays, some of their staff had some time off, so they asked for a little extra time to look that over, but we're optimistic we'll get the go-ahead here very shortly. Any questions about that area? So moving on to leachate treatment pilot update. So as you know, leachate is the industrial wastewater that can flow out of the landfill as rainwater percolates through the garbage. As a reminder, the department has to take care of that wastewater and treat it or evaporate it on site, or we haul it off. About a year ago, the Hayden Area Regional Sewer Board notified us that they wouldn't be able to continue accepting that water unless we treated it to remove substances such as PFAS, PCBs, and certain total dissolved solids. So Kootenai County Solid Waste solicited local publicly owned treatment works or sewer plants for any potential future standards. Most sewer plants do not want to accept leachate. However, they did provide us with some lists of constituents so that in the event any treatment method we found, they would potentially be able to accept that water in an emergency situation. Kootenai County Solid Waste worked with Jacobs Engineering and Dynatech Systems out of New Jersey for a treatment evaluation and a bench scale pilot, which I have reported was successful. So we're currently working on getting a full-scale pilot system put in place by March of 2024 or sometime in March. I will be coming to the board likely for fund approval for that project. Kootenai County Solid Waste did inquire about the costs of the full-size pilot system as in comparison to a very small pilot system, and in the hopes that we may be able to kill two birds with one stone, and that if we were to rent a very large size system, we could treat hopefully 1 million gallons a month, and then at the same time maybe use some of that money toward the eventual purchase of a system if it does indeed work. Dynatech did work with us and gave us a figure of we could potentially recapture 87% of the costs of the equipment when we do that, and the equipment works out to about $35,000 a month, it looks like. So if we ran that for a few months, it really doesn't end up costing us a whole lot of money for the pilot, assuming it works, and we put that toward the eventual purchase of the equipment. That greater amount of treatment would allow us to haul some of that treated wastewater to the Harbs plant during that pilot project and make sure that it doesn't impact their plant. So we would know if we needed to tweak it, or if it does work as it's intended, then we'd know it's a great idea to go ahead and purchase. Also, all the millions of additional gallons of water that could be or that would be processed through this system could be stored and then used through our mister and evaporation system for this summer when we evaporate on the landfill. It's possible that removing a lot of that total dissolved solids, a lot of it being salt, would increase the evaporation and increase the amount that we could get rid of on site. So that would be something else we could find out much quicker if we were to go with this larger pilot system. Moving on to any questions about the pilot system? Okay, moving on to landfill phase E3 construction project. A new area of the landfill known as landfill cell expansion phase E3 recently went out to bid. Today at the business meeting, the solid waste department will present our recommendation on the bid award. Construction of that project is planned and will occur in 2024. So that was just quickly to touch base on that because that's a very important project for the solid waste department. Moving on to landfill closure plan and cost update. Jacobs Engineering just completed the closure plan and cost update for the Fighting Creek landfill. This is an important document that's helpful for future planning and budgeting of the site. Closing a landfill is a very costly, and it is important that we appropriately set monies aside for that inevitable cost. Typical costs not only include the actual cost of capping or covering the landfill, but also 30 years of environmental monitoring after you finish in that area. So Kootenai County Solid Waste has given this document to the auditor's office so that we can work closely together to make sure sufficient funds are being set aside for this future expense, so that the taxpayers today or the ratepayers today are paying for the closure now rather than just shifting the burden to people in the future. Moving on to landfill cell.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead.
You said 30 years of environmental monitoring.
Yep.
Are there any triggers in that 30 years that could extend that environmental monitoring?
So that question, originally when Subtitle D came out, which were rules and regulations that said these landfills that didn't have bottom liners had to change the way they were doing business, that was ironically about 30 years ago. And so the Ramsey landfill falls into that exact category you're talking about, where we're about to build the area for public dumping. That landfill is still producing gas. And so the original rule said you'd have to monitor the landfill for a minimum of 30 years. And they thought 30 years would be the limit, but what they're finding out is that a lot of these landfills are still producing gas. So we're still on the hook officially, until the landfill quits putting out substance into the environment that you can measure. So as far as I know, nobody's getting off the hook at this point. So there could be, if, like, let's say the landfill at Fighting Creek is continuing to put out leachate beyond that 30-year period, we'd still be on the hook for controlling that leachate and taking care of it.
Yeah, but you're using 30 years as your amortization schedule for how long you want to collect fees for into the future from today's people.
Yeah, so we're collecting enough money now to pay for immediately if we had to close today's landfill, cap it, and pay for that 30-year period. And so that's what the rules state, is that you want to plan for that period of time, because that's what you're currently on the hook for, if you will, even if it could go beyond.
So the book is 30, but it could be more than likely is going to be longer.
It could, yes. And in that same time period, like, portions of Fighting Creek will likely close as other parts open. So you may start your 30-year period in this area and cap and close in the current cell and the east cell expansions, but then when you shift to the south, the clock would begin on that other closed area, but you'd still be out there and still be running operations, still have environmental personnel on site anyway as your day-to-day. So some of those funds may be paid for out of just day-to-day operations as well. So.
Okay. All right. Well, thank
And
you.
then, so piggybacking on that, the Ramsey station, are we still financially in a good spot because we're still having to monitor that?
Yeah, and so that, luckily, we've been able to just wrap that up into operations. So that's a good way to look at what I've just described, is that because we're operating already, we already have environmental technicians. So we didn't have a separate closure fund for Ramsey. We're paying for that, the closure there, out of monies that paid to cap it years ago. And then our environmental technicians monitor that monthly, the gas at the Ramsey station under our current operations budget. And that's been done for over 30 years.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Moving on to landfill south cell permitting. So a couple of years ago, we began working on south cell permitting. This is an important project in that the county purchased property some years back when Roger Satterfield was director as an additional area of property that was not part of the original permitting. We really need to get that area also permitted and wrapped in the same conditional use permit within it, so that we can eventually put landfill in that area. It's an important project because it'll extend the life of our landfill, but the that property is surrounded by currently, or fairly surrounded by areas that are already permitted. So it shouldn't be too difficult of a task, but we've been already collecting background information on that area and are ready to move forward with that. So that will be opening up this spring again. Fighting Creek landfill operations. Garbage volumes have slowed slightly, which is normal for this time of year. Of course, Christmas and New Year's, you do see upticks in garbage for those weeks, but other than that, they've generally slowed. Currently, the guys the crew is building a lift upward at about an additional 15 feet off of a road system that we already used for the lower lifts, or reusing that road. If you can imagine, you build a road out and you're putting garbage off of it as you build the road out. Now they're pushing garbage up, and we're reclaiming, using that road 2 times to try to save some money. And it also helps with compaction when you're working uphill, so it saves landfill space. This also helps minimize cover soil usage. You have to cover that garbage, and saves road building costs. So the crew has also been building a new road on top of the old area of the landfill, and soon we will transition to that operational area. Some benefits of moving to that area: it'll slow the progression of garbage as we build across the landfill, because there's a higher lift area, so we build it in 2 lifts. It'll just slow down how fast we move across, which helps minimize the need for cover soil, and also allows better stormwater control in a sense that you can leave areas that are covered with plastic sheeting and already ready for stormwater for this winter and spring. The runoff period, you don't go over those with garbage and ruin those areas that are ready to sheet water. So this will slow them down and allow us to allow that water in those areas to sheet off cleanly. So it'll also create an area for whatever contractor selected to place cover soil this summer near our working face, so that we won't have to be in the contractor's way. We can put soil, have the contractor haul soil right near our working area, so we can use that dirt in that area to just cover the garbage immediately adjacent to the pile. So this, by shifting to this area, will allow us to build a big flat area for cover soil placement this summer. Moving on to the landfill gas system. Overall, the gas collection system has been operating very well. This has been relatively easy winter, though. I do acknowledge that. And sometimes ice and very cold conditions can impact the gas collection system. But all necessary gas lines for the current lift have been installed. That new 12-inch landfill gas jumper line that the commissioners approved about a year ago has given us additional vacuum to the north end of the landfill, and has greatly improved our ability to maintain landfill gas collection on the north end of the landfill. So it has helped with odor control. And that was very good that those guys got that installed before winter. So moving to transfer station operations. Transfer stations have slowed slightly, which is typical for this time of year also. We're really busy today, being immediately after the holiday. Our crews have been doing a great job at both the transfer stations, and operations have been very smooth. I do want to give a public thank you for all the work that all of our crews have done this whole entire past in 23. It was a very smooth year. It was a safe year, and knock on wood, we'll have another one. So moving on to staffing levels and recruitment. During my last update, I was very proud to report that our department was fully staffed. Since that time, we have experienced some minor turnover, but nothing out of the normal. We currently have 4 open positions: 1 equipment operator, 1 labor equipment operator, and 2 solid waste technicians or spotters. Like I said, it's not unusual to see these open positions this time of year. Many people, don't want to work outside when it's cold, and so we'll see some turnover. And then a lot of times we pick people back up in the spring. So I expect we'll fill these positions fairly soon.
I have a question. How do you see your number of positions moving into the future as far as the capacity? Because of the growth of the community, you're obviously taking on more solid waste. How does that work with staffing levels? Are you able to?
So I do believe that our department will grow with the population over time, and typically we see, 1 new employee about every 3 years, and that's just been the way it's kind of gone. And that's not set in stone. There hasn't been really a plan for that. We keep track of safety, and if tasks are being done. It could be we may need additional office help, I think would be the next staffing increase that we would see because of the amount of billing we have to do in the department. and also if we, as we get better control of rural collection sites, that would trigger additional staffing. If we fenced a site, staffed a site, that takes people to run it. So I do see that. But the good news is, as garbage increases in a lot of situations, such as at the landfill, just the economy of scale and the fact that you have to run very large equipment, we could handle additional garbage without additional personnel at the landfill, provided we keep the same hours and the same days of the week as we're running.
And that was my question, is there any kind of scale with the equipment so you can do more with better equipment
Yeah,
with the same number of people?
yeah, and we have budgeted for larger equipment. The next compactor we purchase will be the next bigger size.
Okay.
But again, it still takes one guy, or one person, I should say, to
Sure.
run that piece of equipment. So that's the good news. I think the landfill will be very functional unless we choose to open Sundays, and then that would require additional people. But I think we really are paying attention to that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Moving on to rural sites. So I always like to touch on rural sites because it's a big part of our collection system in the county. Sunshine Recycling has continued to do a good job with the haul of the refuse from the rural collection sites to the transfer station. As you mentioned, Bruce, during Christmas and New Year's, some of our unstaffed rural collection sites do get hit very hard. This is primarily because the transfer stations are closed for one day, one day for Christmas, one day for New Year's. And because they're the only sites open, a lot of people in the county realize that I could take my garbage up to one of the rural sites. So in general, people are pretty good about not throwing their garbage on the ground, but you do see all the containers get pretty haystacked, and then that triggers a lot of extra work on the day following both of those holidays and some of our summer holidays also. We have put bins out to kind of alleviate some of these issues at various sites. This year, I did notice that the Micah site was hit pretty hard. And so, but Sunshine's been very good about the cleanup. We haven't had any issues beyond just the following day. So Sunshine Recycling is aware of this, and they are currently working to clean up these sites. Overall, the sites have been looking very good when you look at them the rest of the time, and the levels of abuse have continued to be fairly low when compared to previous years. So most of this is because of, as I'm moving on to patrol and public education, the Sheriff's Department continues to do an excellent job patrolling and educating the public at these facilities. The main concerns we really have is we do not want commercial dumping at these sites because the Solid Waste Department loses revenue, and a lot of times commercial vehicles tend to fill containers with the wrong types of materials. And then also, we don't want residents placing material on the ground, and that, of course, is out of environmental concern, and it's littering. So we just want to keep the sites neat and tidy and make sure that's not occurring. Any questions?
Do you ever have issues with animals getting into trash when it's on the ground?
It's difficult to say what pulls it out, but we do have cameras at some of these sites. Usually the people tend to be the animals that go in and pull things out of the dumpsters. I have not ever seen a black bear, or I've seen cats at the sites, but never seen an animal. Actually, the containers are pretty tall, so you really don't get a lot of that.
But stuff that's put on the ground now, it
yeah.
makes it much easier for animals to.
Yeah, I could see, sometimes it's scattered, so it's difficult to tell unless you're there. But we do have cameras at a few sites, and I have not seen, coyotes or anything, really making a mess. So
Okay.
I'm sure some of that is occurring, though.
Yeah.
So, moving on to solid waste statistics, I really wanted to give you a 12-month comparison, but because we're so close to the new year, we'll be looking at January through November of 2022 versus 2023, just to kind of give you an idea of what's occurring in there as far as garbage volumes. So at Ramsey, the customer count was up 4.92%. The tonnage was up 3.22%. Now, when you look at transfer stations, just keep in mind that includes recyclables and not just trash going to the landfill. So some of these numbers, so that they make sense a little bit later. Prairie was up 5.3% with customer counts, but the garbage was only up 2%. So when you look, or I should say tonnage, when tonnage was up. So tonnage is up about 3% average between the two transfer stations, but the tonnage at the landfill is only up 1.4%. Just means we had additional recycling that occurred in the landfill. It could have been wood waste, it could have been cardboard and things like that, but recycling is slightly up. So landfill tonnage is up 1.4%, and of that landfill tonnage, 5,511 tons was hauled directly to the landfill by contractors. So that saves hauling and handling at the transfer stations, because we have some of those larger loads, demolished houses, things like that, go directly to the landfill, so we don't have to move that garbage through the transfer station. So rural customer visits was actually Athol and Chilco, the site visits, the number of visits were down 3.85%, and the tonnage was down 11.76%, which that seems unbelievable. And that those numbers could be slightly skewed because we have a different hauler. So the previous year when we were looking, Coeur d'Alene garbage was hauling for a portion of the year, and so the way that they are reporting garbage could have been slightly different. So I don't want to officially say our garbage is down 11.76%, because haulers are allowed to pick up some residential waste because they're not paid by the tonnage when they haul this. So it could be that Coeur d'Alene garbage was picking up extra waste from customers, and it's difficult to separate that when they're out there. So they pick up our rural collection, then they go to neighboring, surrounding areas like in rural areas and pick up some household waste. So that could have really skewed the numbers there. So with that, that concludes my solid waste update, unless you have any questions.
Questions?
No, I'm just, excuse me, I'm glad that you're doing it. You, from all indications I see, are doing a fantastic job. So thank you and keep it up.
Thank you.
How could I disagree with that?
Thanks, Bill.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you. All right, public comment again. No? All right, 11:21, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank everybody over there for doing a great job.